Today I want to invite you to put away your video games and put away social media and learn how to create alongside me as I paint this beautiful sculpture. This is Katarina. We're going to try something a little bit different this week, as I'm going to be actually recording my voiceover for the first time in video as well. So you get two of me. See, my hands will be in 4 places at once. Now, let's jump right into this because we have a lot to cover. So you can see I slowly took Katarina apart after test fitting her, which I highly recommend you do, especially if you're new to this. Before you begin painting, sand everything and test fit everything to make sure it fits perfectly before you start priming. Now, what you see I'm doing here is I'm priming with different colors because I found that it's a nice change to just spraying everything in black. So I'm actually priming in, well, I started with black, with Raven black, which is like a dark gray, light black, whichever one you want to call it. And now I'm spraying with a Gauntlet Gold. Now these are from Color Forge. They do a great job of providing many different primers in different colors. So it is a primer, not a paint. But I do use this as a basis for all my paint that I'm going to be doing. And it's very important that you prime this resin first because you want to make sure your paint adheres really well. And primer is not paint, it is primer, and it is specifically designed to help your paint adhere later in the stages. Now I'm choosing specific colors like this pink here or magenta for a very specific reason. In the case of like her head here, and you saw earlier her legs, skin tones need to be painted over a pink color or you will get some weird discoloration on the yellow. Highly recommend you paint in pink first. Now you can see here I have some other colors such as the gold you saw, and her hair is red, so I'm actually starting with a red. And what I've found that works really well with these primers is to actually start with a color that's close, whether it's a mid-tone or a base color, like a shadow color as well, and kind of use that as a basis to then add highlights and shadows. But we'll come back to that in a moment. Let's focus on this base. I forgot to record the gray dry brushing that I did on the stone and the wood, but if you've seen any of my other videos, you've seen I do this quite often, so definitely go check those out. I'll leave something up here for you all to do that. Now what you saw I was doing was making my own dark gray shadow, or not shadow, but highlight for the cloak that's on the ground, and I was just dry brushing that on. And what I'm doing here is I'm adding some medium gray highlights, so these are a little bit lighter of a gray, and you can see the contrast versus the original coat that I put on there, which was a very dark gray. Specifically, the original coat was done in basalt gray, which is a dial dry brush color from Ammo, and you can see how beautiful that looks as it's all prepped for the next step. Now, I've been loving these AK Quick Gen paints. They're really wonderful. They are essentially an alternative to Citadel, and that's not to say that Citadel is bad or that AK Quick Gen is better, but AK Quick Gen is cheaper and you get the same effect. So the other beautiful thing I love about it is it has the dropper bottle. So those are available at my store, by the way. If you want some Quick Gen, I have it on my store. Again, links will be in the description for you for that. But for right now, you can see I'm just brushing that over top of my dry brush that I did earlier. That's what's so great about the dry brushing with the black to white or black to gray, and then adding in your transparent paint such as the Quick Gen or Vallejo, Express, Citadel, etc., Army Painters, Speed Paints. You're taking advantage of that dry brush. And I'm doing the same here with this crimson red to create this wine that's been spilled. So you can see how it adds some contrast just because of the highlights that we made earlier with the dry brushing. Now I'm breaking out what's by far my favorite acrylic gold paint, and that is Atom Gold. Atom Gold just flows so much better off of the brush, and it actually leaves the same metallic sheen as my AK Gold pigment markers, which I'm really happy with. So you can see I just did this with a brush. Specifically, I did it with a number 0 brush from Abteilung, which is just, it's a Marta Kolinsky sable brush. Now you'll notice now that you've seen the transparent paint dry, it has like a matte finish to it. If you're looking at it now, as I add the gloss varnish, you'll notice that it's getting that shiny wet look. So if you want to make your specific things on your model, such as that wine there, or like lips or eyes look wet, you need to add a gloss varnish to them, because most of your paint is going to have a flat or satin varnish or finish, I'm sorry, at best. So now what I'm doing is, this Gauntlet gold is really rich and deep gold, and I wanted to add some highlights, just a little bit of contrast. So what I did was I dry brushed with this Brilliant Gold, another AK diode, or AK, sorry, ammo diode dry brush color here, and it just adds a little bit of contrast and depth to those details on that helmet that's there. I did the same with the wine goblet that's there, and then to blend it, if you'll notice what I did here is I'm adding in just a little bit of red, the same red color, that crimson red, along the edges, so it kind of hides that seam. Just a small little detail, but I really think it brings it together. And this is a really cool, really simple yet really elegant scene that we put together with plenty of little details. That took me about an hour in real life, so it really wasn't that much to do. So again, really cool design. Again, this one's by Nerikson, who is partnered with Bulkamancer in this case. If you haven't checked out Nerikson on Patreon, or on My Mini Factory, I'm sorry, he's incredible. An incredible artist. I have a bunch of his models, really good. Let's move on. So I'm adding some contrast here to the gold again, but I'm doing a little bit differently this time. I took bronze and did it from below, sprayed it from below like a reverse zenithal to create a shadow, because it's got like that reddish tint to it, the bronze does. And then I sprayed the same Atom Gold from above to create highlights. And you can see in there, if you look as I'm turning that leg, you can see the highlights and the shadows. And I was really happy with this. I've never done it before on gold, but I really loved how it finished. I really loved how it turned out. So now onto the fabric. This is like the highlight other than the gold. This is one of my favorite parts of this model specifically, is I've never had a magenta and gold character that I can remember, at least not to this level. So we started with that pink primer that I used as a base coat, in this case, the mid-tone, if you will. And I sprayed over the, or it should say in the shadows, with the Space Magenta from AK's Quick Gen range, and that just created shadows, right? So we're putting it inside the folds to create a mirage, if you will, an illusion of depth by creating shadows where the folds are. Now, this next step is where it really gets magical, is I just got this Turbo Dork in. I heard about it on Discord, people were talking about it, and I figured I'll try it. I got the whole collection of Turbo Dork paints, and I'm using this Sakura specifically because it's a really light pink, but like a light magenta, but it's got metallic fleck in it, and I'm spraying it in a zenithal pattern, meaning I'm spraying it as if the light is coming down on to my subject or on these parts. And what I'm getting is this beautiful light pink metallic sheen on all the raised edges. It might be hitting some of the shadowed areas too, but because of the way the light hits it, it looks like it's only landing on the tops of the folds. I think this piece I'm spraying right now really shows it the best in terms of the effect you can get. As you can see, I'm really spraying it very heavily from above, and as I hold it in the light, you can see how you can see the sheen, and it almost makes the perfect line. It really does, along those folds, really selling the illusion of very shiny sheen fabric on the tops and nice shadows in the depths. Now for her hair, I'm just simply spraying some shadows and highlights in the bottom parts or the folds of her hair, and then I'm adding, you'll see I'm going to do a red highlight from above to add some more depth. And it's really important with hair to add contrast and depth, because I've seen so many pieces where there's so much emphasis put on every other part of the model except the hair, and it very much so stands out. I typically like to dry brush hair, but in this case it works out pretty well because of the way it was sculpted, and also it's 1/8 scale. I should really point that out. This is not a large scale model like you typically see on my channel, which is usually 1/6 to 1/4 scale is what you see on my channel. So this is definitely smaller than what I typically do, but you can see how my same techniques work at even these smaller scales. So for instance, here with this Raven Black, remember this is that light black or very dark gray, I'm spraying black now in the shadow folds. So you can see why I chose something that wasn't just black. If it was reversed, I'd have to spray highlights onto the edges rather than shades into the shadows or the folds. So I wanted to do it that way. So I sprayed the black in the folds, same effect as the magenta, just using black. Now with the skin tones, you can see here I'm painting over that pink that I mentioned earlier that, like I said, you highly recommend if you're going to spray any kind of flesh tones or yellows even, you want to spray them over pink. It just works. If you spray them over white, they tend to desaturate and turn greenish, and it's not really pretty. So I'm using specifically here Ionic's Imperial Flesh. I've been using this flesh recipe for quite some time now, and when I say quite some time, probably since Ionic came out. And I begged Ammo to make a set for me, but they made a set for someone else, but it's still not matching my set. So you guys can tell me if you like the sets that they have or my set better. Totally up to you. But Imperial Flesh is my base coat over top of the pink. And Imperial Flesh is a nice, it's not necessarily a neutral flesh tone, it's got some of the golden yellows in it, which gives us some saturation that we want instead of the desaturated skin. And then after I do that, I switch over to the tan skin, okay, the tan flesh. Now sometimes if you don't want this to be overdone, what I'll do is I'll switch over to put a little bit of dwarf skin in, which gives it like a peachish tone, like a slightly peacher tone. If you want maybe like a lighter shade instead of such a dark tan, you can do that as well. It's a wonderful combination. I've done it before in my videos. Again, there'll be plenty of links floating around for that. Check them out as you would like. But the real secret is this elf skin. This is the big contrast moment because elf skin is so light. You can see just on her back there the difference on the top to the bottom, and then on her face it's going to highlight all of her facial details. And that's what's going to be really key, is that contrast is going to sell this thing as realistic when you're looking at it really close. Some folks like more contrast than others. I like a reasonable amount of contrast so that way my models feel real even when they're a smaller scale. So now you can see after I painted all the gold trimmings on the rest of the parts what they look like. Just some samples there. I painted it the same way I did the cloak on the base. Very simply take a small brush and go along the top edge like sideways, and it just makes it so the paint only adheres to the top and you don't get any like over brushing on the edges or anything like that. Now with her lips here, I'm using like a wine red, I think is the color I chose, and it is an Ionic color at that. Wine red for her lips. It's a very nice color. It's a deep red color, which is beautiful for a woman's lips. And I'm using a 3-0 brush, so it's a 000 brush on this face. And honestly, I probably should have broken out my 5-0 because at 1/8 scale, this is a really small face to try to paint with even a 000 brush. So if you're new to the hobby and you're wondering what size brushes to get, I highly recommend you get at least a 000 and then get every piece up to a 2. That should do you for most of what you need. You might want to get a 4 or a 6 for large coverage if you're not using an airbrush, but if you are using an airbrush, then you can probably max out at a 2. What you see me using here is mostly a 000 for these details, but as I said, if you want to go smaller, you can go to like a quadruple or a, what would it be for 5-0 brush, right? 5/0. Get that size brush. What you can see I'm doing here now is I'm actually using that small brush and painting on black. So I'm just doing all the black details like her eyebrows and her eyelashes here. And I always like to do the bottom of the eyelash too, which is really, really nice. It really adds a level of depth, but also a level of reality because you do have eyelashes on the bottom of your eye. One last thing, since I was talking about brushes, if you're getting into the hobby and you don't have an airbrush and you're looking for a new one, I'll definitely leave some recommendations down in the description for you because you'll hear so many people swear by this, that, and the next thing, and I'll tell you exactly what you can get for a really cheap price. One of my favorite ones is a Procon PS275 from GSI Krios. Absolutely one of the best user-friendly airbrushes out there that you can get for like less than $90 over at Spray Gunner. Highly recommend it. I use it in almost every single one of my videos because it's such a good all-rounder and it's easy on the hand because it's got a trigger. So if you're new to the hobby and you want to try an airbrush, I recommend that PS275. I'll make sure I have a link down in the description below for you for that. I know there's other people that'll recommend all sorts of things, and definitely listen to them, try them out if you want to, but I'm giving you my best recommendation on that one. Now that we have all the black details done on her face, I want to make sure I do the highlights on the fabric that's on her waist. And as you guys don't know, because I didn't record this part, I did not mask this off and paint it with an airbrush. I actually hand painted that magenta on. And if you remember, the magenta I used before was actually a primer can, so I actually had to color match this to Ionic, and it actually was a dead ringer for Ionic's magenta, same exact color. So Ionic magenta by hand, about 3 or 4 coats. It did take a little while because it was over black. And then I'm highlighting it with that same Sakura, the Turbo Dork paint is what I'm using here. And it's almost like dry brushing, but what I'm doing is I'm holding my brush sideways and I'm hitting all those edges is what I'm doing. So all right, that's what she looks like now with her torso done. And I was doing that while the eyes were drying, because it's really important with the eyes. In between steps, it's kind of slow because you got to wait for everything to dry. Using your airbrush to bring, you know, lots of dry air across the face will help speed up the process a little bit. What I'm doing here is I'm adding in the ivory white of her eyes, and I do recommend using an ivory or some other off-white. Don't use bright white, and I'll tell you why. And I've done it in many of my videos. I did not do it in this one here because of how small her eyes are, but when you're doing a larger scale, it's nice to have a bright white for use of like a speckle in her eye, showing that the light is hitting her eye. It's a really nice, cool feature that you usually see in anime and stuff like that, but it works very well on, again, the larger scales where you can really see the eyes. So after I have the ivory in place, I'm switching over to these two colors, Storm Blue and Light Blue. I absolutely love these colors for blue eyes because it looks a little bit more natural, I think, than like a super bright blue, because the Storm Blue is almost like a watery blue color, like it's got a little bit of green into it. And then the light blue obviously acts as a highlight. So I'm putting Storm Blue in her entire eye socket. Now, the cool thing with this designer is that they actually put in a like divot for the iris, which makes the circle real easy to make. You don't actually have to draw it. So if it looks like I'm like incredible at making a perfect circle, it's the designer. I actually can't take credit for that on this one. And then I put black pupils in after I put the highlights in. Now to finish her face off, she has this gold piece on, and I'm just painting that gold. And again, this is the Atom Gold that I'm painting with. And again, it just has such a beautiful sheen to it. You don't need to add any kind of like varnish or anything to it to make it have that metallic sheen. It's just a really beautiful sheen to begin with. And you can see how I'm just painting over that. That's what I'm saying. It's one of the best golds that I've ever found. Best one that I've ever used. That's easy to brush and airbrush. A little bit better than the Ionic Gold because it doesn't settle out as much. So Ionic's metallics are iffy in comparison to Atom's. I actually prefer Atom's metallics over Ionic. So that is me finishing up her edges, and I think in this case I'm using a 0 brush. So again, you can see why you want different size brushes for different things. And there is her face all finished up in 1/8 scale. So we have one last thing we need to address, which is her swords that we painted a while ago. And I'm showing you here how it looks afterwards, and I'm going to go back and show you how I've done it. Is I wanted to create the silver parts around the pink recessed parts. So I sprayed the magenta on first, or pink if you will, and then I'm dry brushing on all the metallics. And when you dry brush, you're only going to get paint on the raised edges. So I dry brushed in gunmetal first just to get a nice base down of silver, and then I'm switching over to light metal. And I just want to show you, although I showed it earlier, how these dry brush paints work. They're just a thick paint, which any thick paint will work, but you also need a thick brush. And most dry brushes, they actually use like a goat hair, so it's very, very thick. And what you do is just dab it off onto a paper towel until you barely get any out of it, because you've gotten all the paint off of the outside of the brush. It's only inside, which is why it's considered dry brushing. So when you go over these raised edges, it actually will grab the paint out of the inside of the brush, and it'll only paint the raised edges. And what you see here is you get a nice contrast of different shades of steel color, and you still keep that recessed pink, and it looks really, really phenomenal. And there she is. I just want to say thank you all for watching this video. If you could please like and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Did you like it? Is there something you would have done differently? Are you ready to take up this and you have some questions as to what printer to get, what paints to get, what brushes or airbrushes to get? Please leave a comment below and I'll happily get back to you as soon as possible. Also, if you could check out my website at relentlessstormmodels.com where you can get these prints yourself, that'd be great. Or support my work over on Patreon and get more timely updates. I'll see you guys next time with more awesome models.